hasn't left the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has left me.
Welcome back to CBC News Sunday. It's no secret that the Conservative government is preparing for a possible election campaign. Riding associations across the country are busy picking their local candidates. But in 3 cases so far, Conservative Party headquarters in Ottawa has said thanks, but no thanks. In one case, they rejected a popular Conservative MP who has a proven track record of winning. Bill Casey has represented the Amherst area riding in Nova Scotia since 1988, except for 1 term. But in June of this year, he was booted out of the Conservative caucus for voting against his government's budget that he said changed Nova Scotia's offshore accord with Ottawa.
In some ways, it was very difficult. In other ways, I just don't think I have any choice.
Despite his ouster, last month, Casey once again won the Conservative nomination in his riding. But party headquarters rejected the nomination and suspended the local riding association. This week brought reports of more of the same. Brent Barr ran for the Conservatives in the last election and lost, but he was nominated to run again until party brass said no. Barr says they accuse him of not campaigning hard enough. International trade lawyer Mark Warner had been selected by local Conservatives to run in the riding of Toronto Centre. But Warner says he's been told not to run. He says it's because he tried to raise local social issues like poverty and HIV/AIDS. Yesterday, I spoke with Bill Casey and Mark Warner. Joining me now is Bill Casey in our Moncton studios, and Mark Warner is here in our Toronto studios. Mark Warner, let me begin with you. Why were you rejected as a nominee for the Conservative Party?
The reasons that they gave were largely that a failure to follow the messaging of the party or the instructions from the national campaign manager.
In what way?
Well, they weren't specific. I mean, this was the difficulty with the process when we tried to appeal it. Because they weren't specific, we had to sort of try to figure out from our imagination what they were really saying. But I'm not running from that, Carol, because I think that, I know that over the last number of months, there were objections made to, let's say, my website. They wanted to take control of my website and give me a standard party template, which wouldn't have had as much local issues on it. That was sort of the issue. And I guess there were other issues I've talked about before that, my bio that's on my website and that is on our campaign materials references the fact that I attended the International AIDS Conference. When my bio was sent up to Ottawa, rather mysteriously, it came back without that reference. And I'd heard, through the grapevine over the last few months that one of the things that they objected to in the previous flyers was the reference to that. But frankly, I couldn't believe anybody would really take that so seriously. It's an issue that's of great importance to the lesbian and gay community in our riding, which is the largest lesbian and gay community in the country, and it's of interest to people beyond that community.
So, Bill Casey, is some of this ringing a bell for you? Explain what happened to you.
Well, it certainly is ringing a bell. And first of all, I just want to say that I think I'd vote for Mark if he was running in my riding. He's very impressive, and how could you not support that man? Well, I believe that this country has an awful lot of different cultures, an awful lot of different issues. Every riding has different issues, and if members of Parliament and candidates can't represent those interests, it's our democratic system falls far short of our ability to represent people.
Let's talk about your specific situation. Where does it stand right now?
Well, I'm sitting as an independent, and as far as I know, I'm running as an independent in the next election. I'm gathering up the resources, and I'm gearing up to run as an independent. I sit as an independent in the opposition side in the House. I'm quite comfortable there. I have lots of leg room in the back row, and that's where I am. And I find that I still have all the tools I had to work with before, and some new ones.
And what are the new ones?
Well, for one thing, I can talk to you.
You weren't allowed to talk to me previously?
Well, I mean, there's very strong restrictions on what people can say. I mean, on every issue, there's 1 or 2 people assigned to speak on behalf of the issue.
But you were given the nomination from the Conservative Riding Association.
I was, and then it was reconfirmed and reconfirmed again. But The National Council has overridden my democratically elected riding association has been overridden, and Mr. Harper has appointed an advisory committee to look after all the affairs of my riding association, including the money we had raised for the next election. And they won't even tell us who's on the advisory committee. It's a secret committee that meets at times they don't tell us, and we don't even know who's on it. We don't know what's happening with our money. And it's just about the most undemocratic process I've ever seen.
Do you get that the Prime Minister might be thinking to himself, okay, I have this MP who's part of my party who has voted against me in a confidence motion that could have brought down the budget. How can I trust this person? I'm going to expel him from the party.
Well, I mean, it's tradition that you're expelled from the party if you vote against the budget. But it's interesting that this was a non-confidence vote, and I voted non-confidence in the government because they broke a contract. And here's the contract. It's 9 paragraphs long, and you can see in the back page the Government of Canada signed it right under the little red Canadian flag. And I think when the Government of Canada signs a contract, it should be bulletproof, and you shouldn't break it. I don't think the Government of Canada should break their word, their promises, and especially their written contracts. So I voted non-confidence in the government because I can't have confidence in a government that breaks contracts with my province.
What do you think the common thread is here and the implications of the Conservative Party saying, we will approve who we would like for the party, not the local riding associations?
Well, if I could answer that, I would say, that I think it is a very important issue. I mean, in this morning's Toronto Star, the former Lieutenant Governor of Ontario and a former Conservative candidate in Toronto Centre, Hal Jackman, is quoted as being very, very angry at what's done here. And he says, look, the local riding association must have the right to choose its candidate. Again, I have had the support of my riding association throughout this process and throughout the appeal, and anyone to say anything other than that would be saying something that is patently false. And, I think it's important that when we go up to Parliament, when you're elected, we elect a Parliament that's supposed to reflect the country. And that can only happen if the local riding associations can choose candidates who reflect the will of their community. Now, if at some point a candidate loses the support of his riding association or community, that should be up to that riding association or community to eject that candidate. It really shouldn't come from people from landmark Manitoba if I'm a candidate in Toronto Centre.
Bill Casey?
Well, it was interesting in the Halifax Herald. The president of the National Council, Don Plett, said this is a very democratic process. All these candidates, me and Mr. Warner, and were all elected in a democratic process, so it's all democratic. But what he didn't mention was it was very undemocratic to remove Mr. Warner and me as well. And the way I see it, it's a selective democracy. They choose what they want out of democracy, and if it doesn't work for them, then they just overrule it.
So why do you think they did this? In your heart of hearts, why do you think, Mark Warner, that they did this?
I think that they have a very strict view of what constitutes being on message. And so what's bizarre about my case is that now even being on message is not being on message. It's like unless I'm on the specific message of the day or whatever the theme of the week is. But my writing has other issues, and I never went beyond the policy that the party has advanced on those issues. And as I say, if somebody is telling me now that attending an AIDS conference attended by the Minister of Health and the Minister of International Cooperation violates government policy, that is good for me to know that. But I've never heard that and never seen that, and I don't think that's the case.
So where are you going to go next? I mean, are you a conservative? Will you go to another party, the Liberals, NDP, what? Well,
I think my beliefs have not changed since the beginning of last week, but the party has changed, and so I'll have to reflect on that. I've seen some very generous comments, flattering comments from Mr. Dion about me in the press recently, and my opponents here in Toronto Centre, Bob Ray, and as well as from the Green Party and the NDP, and I will listen to all that and reflect on it. But at the time being, I haven't left the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has left me.
Bill Casey, are you a conservative?
Look, I've been a conservative since I can remember. I remember I met John Diefenbaker in 1957, so that's how far back that goes. But I agree with Mark. I don't even think this party is a conservative party as we know it. It's something else.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much.